if they told you that behind the scenes of one of the most controversial religious films in history, there were such supernatural events that, to this day, members of the crew refuse to talk about what really happened? What would you do if you could access the confidential files from the filming of The Passion of the Christ? Those documents that Mel Gibson ordered sealed forever in 2025 as the filming of the sequel, The Resurrection of Christ, approaches. Sources close to the original production have begun to reveal secrets that remained buried for more than 2 decades. They are not just strange coincidences or set accidents. They are manifestations that defy any scientific explanation and that forever transform the lives of all those involved. When Mel Gibson recently announced that filming of the sequel would begin in August 2025, Jim Caviezel confessed in an exclusive interview that he feels fear. But it is not fear of the role or the physical demands. It is fear of what might happen again. Yes, I am afraid, but if I were not afraid, I would not enjoy working as an actor, because we are never ready. And this is a war, revealed the actor, who will be digitally de-aged to maintain visual continuity of events that in the storyline take place just 3 days after the crucifixion. What Caviezel did not say publicly is that this war is not only artistic, it is a spiritual battle that began the moment he accepted to portray Jesus Christ, and it never truly ended. The most shocking revelations come from a confidential medical report recently obtained by sources close to the production, which documents unexplained events during the original filming. Jim Caviezel was not struck by lightning once, as was made public, but twice. On the second occasion, during the crucifixion scene, witnesses reported that the actor's hair literally caught fire, but he remained conscious and continued the scene. Most disturbing of all, the medical tests performed immediately afterward showed anomalies in his cardiovascular system that led to 2 heart surgeries, including an open heart operation. But what doctors were never able to explain is how Caviezel survived the electrical impacts without permanent neurological damage. If you seek to understand the divine mysteries that happen around us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share in the comments your own spiritual experiences that may have a connection to what you are about to discover. What makes these events even more mysterious is the pattern that emerged. They were not isolated accidents. Gene Michelini, the assistant director, was also struck by lightning on 2 separate occasions on the same set. Statistically, the probability of one person being struck by lightning twice in a lifetime is 1 in 9 million. That 2 members of the same crew on the same project were struck multiple times is beyond any probability calculation. Meteorology experts consulted at the time stated that the weather conditions in the filming region showed no characteristics that would justify such intense and concentrated electrical activity. But the lightning was only the beginning. During an interview released in 2023, Caviezel revealed details never before made public about the real injuries he suffered during filming. When the audience sees me spitting blood, it's because I bit my tongue and there was blood all over my face. It was my own blood, confessed the actor. What he did not mention is that, according to leaked medical reports, some of the wounds on his body healed at an abnormal speed, leaving health professionals perplexed. A 35-centimeter scar on his back, the result of 2 accidental lashes that pierced his skin, almost completely disappeared within days, contradicting all known medical protocols. The silence surrounding these events is no coincidence. Sources reveal that Mel Gibson implemented extremely strict confidentiality clauses for all crew members, not for conventional legal reasons, but because some events on the set were considered too sacred to be commercialized. According to internal production documents, recently obtained, Gibson is quoted as saying, "What happened here transcends cinema. It is not entertainment, it is revelation." These words take on new meaning when we consider that, more than 20 years later, dozens of people who worked on the film still categorically refuse to give interviews about their experience. The project that began as an independent film, financed with $30 million from Gibson's own pocket, turned into something that even he could not control. When recently asked about the supernatural events, the director responded enigmatically, "There are things that happened during that production that I will never be able to fully explain. Perhaps they should not be explained." This admission from a filmmaker known for his absolute control over his projects reveals the magnitude of what really occurred behind the scenes of The Passion of the Christ. Sometimes we wonder what exists beyond our physical world, and other times, strange things happen that make us question everything we think about life. In situations like this, a better understanding can mean the difference between confusion and clarity. That is exactly what our ebook, The Secret of the Apparitions of Jesus, offers. Consider acquiring this incredible material for a symbolic price. This exclusive material offers keys to decipher divine signs and understand how Christ manifests in our time. Your contribution allows us to maintain this independent research work. The link to acquire the material is available in the pinned comment. To understand the true nature of the supernatural events that marked the Passion of the Christ, we need to return to the beginning of Mel Gibson's spiritual journey in the late 1990s. The director was not only facing a creative crisis, but also a devastating personal battle against addictions that almost destroyed his life. Sources close to him reveal that Gibson reached the point of considering self-destructive thoughts before an experience he describes as direct divine intervention. In a confidential interview never published, recently obtained by independent researchers, Gibson confessed, "I was literally on my knees on the floor of my office, begging for help, when I felt a physical presence in the room. It was not imagination. It was real, tangible, and it changed everything." Gibson's obsession with the historical and spiritual accuracy of the project reached levels bordering on the supernatural. He hired consultants in ancient languages, biblical archaeologists, and even Catholic mystics to ensure absolute authenticity. But what few know is that Gibson began to receive what he called direct guidance during the writing of the script. In personal notes discovered in 2024, he wrote, "The scenes are not being written by me. I'm only transcribing what I'm seeing. It's as if I were watching the real events and simply recounting them." Handwriting experts confirmed that these notes were made in different states of consciousness, with variations in writing pressure suggesting trance-like experiences. Hollywood's resistance to the project was not only commercial. Studio executives, in secretly recorded conversations later leaked, expressed an inexplicable fear of the content. Jeffrey Katzenberg of DreamWorks was quoted saying, "There is something in this project that makes me physically uncomfortable. I can't explain it, but when I read the script, I feel a presence in the room." Other executives reported disturbing dreams after meetings with Gibson, where they were confronted with visions of biblical events that kept them awake for days. This abnormal resistance led Gibson to fully finance the project, a decision many considered financial suicide, but which he described as absolute obedience to a divine calling. The choice of Jim Caviezel for the role was not conventional. Gibson revealed in a restricted interview that during auditions, Caviezel had what witnesses described as a mystical episode. The actor, who at that time was not particularly religious, began to recite biblical passages in Aramaic, a language he claimed never to have studied. When questioned about this later, Caviezel could not explain how he knew the words, stating that they simply appeared in my mind with perfect clarity. Linguists specializing in ancient Aramaic confirmed that his pronunciation and grammar were impeccable, equivalent to what would be expected of a native speaker of the first century.
Or in the Passion, the
spiritual preparation of the production took on the characteristics of a religious retreat. Gibson implemented daily prayers on the set, not as a formality but as a necessity. Crew members reported that without these prayers, equipment inexplicably failed, weather conditions turned hostile, and accidents multiplied. Father James Martin, an uncredited spiritual consultant on the film, confided in 2024, "Mel quickly understood that he was not just making a movie, he was opening a spiritual portal. Prayer was not optional, it was protection." Martin revealed that he performed minor exorcisms on at least 3 occasions during pre-production on equipment and locations that presented hostile presences. The atmosphere on the set, even before filming began, was described as electrically charged. Experienced technicians, veterans of dozens of productions, reported inexplicable physical sensations while handling equipment intended for the film. Cameras behaved anomalously, recording images that were not being filmed. Audio systems picked up whispers in Aramaic during complete silence. These phenomena were documented in technical reports that the production kept under strict secrecy. John Richardson, a veteran director of photography, admitted in a posthumous interview, "In 40 years of my career, I never saw equipment react that way. It was as if the instruments were being influenced by an external force we could not identify." The most disturbing events began in the first weeks of filming in the region of Matera, Italy. What the crew did not know is that Gibson had deliberately chosen locations with deep spiritual significance. many built on early Christian archaeological sites. Dr. Alessandro Grimaldi, an archaeologist consulting on the project, revealed in documents leaked in 2024 that several locations displayed measurable energetic anomalies he could not explain scientifically. His instruments recorded electromagnetic variations following impossible patterns, as if responding to an organizing intelligence. It was as if the land itself was awake and reacting to our presence, Grimaldi wrote in his confidential reports. The first officially documented supernatural incident occurred during the filming of the Sermon on the Mount. Jim Caviezel was positioned on a rocky elevation when, within seconds, a storm formed exactly over the set. Meteorologists later confirmed there were no atmospheric conditions for such a phenomenon. The lightning that struck Caviezel was captured by multiple cameras. An analysis of the footage revealed anomalous characteristics. The luminous bolt remained visible for exactly 7 seconds, a statistically impossible duration for natural electrical discharges. Even more disturbing, the lightning seemed to emit a golden light not corresponding to the normal spectrum of lightning. Eyewitnesses described the moment with details that remained consistent even under separate questioning. Giovanni Toretti, a camera operator, reported, "I saw the lightning approaching in slow motion, as if it had a life of its own. It was not a random discharge. It seemed intentionally directed, and when it hit Jim, for a few seconds it seemed to shine from within." The most inexplicable thing is that Caviezel not only survived, but continued reciting his lines in Aramaic with perfect precision, even while his body was still being traversed by the electric current. Post-event medical analyses revealed that his heart rate returned to normal during the impact, contradicting all known effects of electrical shocks. The second lightning incident occurred during the crucifixion scene, but this time the circumstances were even more extraordinary. Gene Michelini, the assistant director, was holding a metallic umbrella when a second discharge simultaneously struck both him and Caviezel. High-speed cameras recorded that the lightning split in the air, forming what specialists described as an impossible geometry. Dr. Surs, Elena Vasquez, an atmospheric physicist secretly consulted by the production, analyzed the images and concluded, lightning does not behave that way. The symmetrical branching and prolonged duration defy the laws of known physics. It is as if the electricity were following a predetermined pattern. But the electrical phenomena were only part of a much wider picture of inexplicable manifestations. During the filming of the torture scenes, multiple crew members reported the presence of unidentified figures in the corners of their peripheral vision. These presences never appeared directly but were consistently described as humanoid shapes dressed in white, silently observing. Security cameras on set, later analyzed by specialists in paranormal phenomena, captured luminous anomalies that moved intelligently, deliberately avoiding the focus of the main lenses. The most disturbing event was documented during the filming of the Scourging of Christ. Caviezel had been instructed to wear back protection for the whipping scenes, but during one specific take, the protective device simply disappeared without explanation. When the whip struck his unprotected back, it left a 35-centimeter scar. Witnesses reported that the blood that dripped from the wound showed anomalous characteristics. Confidential laboratory analyses revealed that the blood contained impossible levels of natural endorphins and a cellular structure that remained viable for weeks beyond the normal decomposition process. During the scene of Christ's death, multiple anomalies occurred simultaneously. The temperature around Caviezel dropped by nearly 15 degrees within seconds, creating a visible mist that did not disperse with the wind. Birds of the region, which normally avoided the area due to the noise of production, began circling the set silently in formations that consulted ornithologists described as mourning behavior. Even more extraordinary, meteorological instruments recorded a drop in barometric pressure that lasted exactly 3 minutes, corresponding to the biblical time of darkness during the crucifixion. Francesco de Santis, a veteran sound technician, recorded during this sequence acoustic phenomena that he kept secret for decades. I captured voices whispering in Aramaic that did not come from any actor on set. They were clearly audible in the headphones, but when I isolated the channels, I could not identify the source. It was as if the very stones were speaking. DeSantis preserved these recordings, which were analyzed in 2024 by linguists specializing in ancient Aramaic. According to the experts, the words corresponded to Jewish funeral prayers from the 1st century, pronounced with the specific geographic accent of Judea. The climax of the manifestations occurred during the filming of the resurrection. Although this scene did not appear in the final cut of the film, It was filmed, and the images remain archived under strict secrecy. Sources close to the production revealed that during the sequence, a light of unknown origin completely flooded the set, overexposing all the cameras simultaneously. The light did not come from the sun or any lighting equipment, and its intensity increased gradually over several minutes before abruptly disappearing. Spectral analysis of the light revealed wavelengths that do not correspond to any known source, including an ultraviolet component that should have caused burns but left everyone present completely unharmed. The repercussions of the supernatural events during filming extended far beyond the set, permanently altering the life paths of all those involved. Jim Caviezel faced what he himself described as a professional crucifixion that strangely mirrored the fate of the character he portrayed. Contracts that were practically signed were mysteriously canceled. Promising projects vanished overnight, and longtime agents began avoiding his calls. Most disturbing of all, this exclusion from Hollywood followed patterns that defied rational explanation. Executives who tried to hire Caviezel reported uncomfortable physical experiences during meetings, including severe headaches, unexplained nausea, and an oppressive sense of a hostile presence in their offices. Caviezel's spiritual transformation was as radical as it was inexplicable. Sources reveal that in the weeks following the filming, the actor went through mystical experiences that left him in states of ecstasy for hours. Father Thomas Mackenzie, who became Caviezel's personal confessor, recounted in a posthumous interview, Jim would arrive at the sessions describing visions so vivid and detailed of the biblical period that I myself was transformed by listening to them. He recounted conversations with historical figures, knowledge of first-century religious practices he had never studied, and an understanding of scripture that surpassed that of theologians with decades of study. Mackenzie admitted that he secretly began documenting these sessions, creating an archive of more than 400 pages of revelations that he considered direct divine inspiration. The fate of Mel Gibson followed an equally dramatic trajectory, but in the opposite direction. After the overwhelming success of the film, which grossed more than $600 million worldwide, Gibson expected to consolidate his position as one of Hollywood's most influential directors. Instead, he faced a series of scandals and controversies that seemed to arise supernaturally. In 2006, just 2 years after the film's release, Gibson was arrested for drunk driving and made anti-Semitic comments that destroyed his reputation. But recent investigations revealed aspects of that night never made public. Confidential police reports obtained through judicial sources in 2024 show that Gibson was in a state of extreme mental agitation during the arrest, claiming to have been under constant spiritual attack for months. He told Officer James Mee about experiences of voices whispering in ancient languages and shadows moving independently of their sources. The forensic psychiatrist who evaluated Gibson at the time, Dr. Richard Steinfeld, concluded that the director was suffering from post-traumatic stress of a spiritual nature, a condition he admitted he had never diagnosed before. Steinfeld recently revealed that Gibson described nightly battles against malevolent presences that intensified dramatically after the release of the film. The technical crew faced equally profound transformations. Luca Lionello, who played Judas Iscariot, underwent a sudden and radical religious conversion that shocked family and friends. Lionello, who had declared himself a staunch atheist before filming, was found 3 days after production ended, kneeling in the Church of Santa Maria in Trastevere, Rome, in a state of deep contemplative prayer. When he finally spoke, he revealed that he had experienced what he described as 3 days in hell, where he was confronted with the spiritual consequences of his actions and life choices. His conversion was so impactful that it inspired a wave of baptisms among other crew members, creating what the Italian press called the passion effect. Giuseppe Rotuno, a veteran cinematographer with more than 50 years of career, went through an experience that led him to retire immediately after filming. In his unpublished memoirs, discovered after his death in 2021, Rotuno wrote, "In half a century of filming, I thought I had seen it all, but during the passion, I captured things through the lenses that were not visible to the naked eye. Faces in the shadows, light emanating from people, phenomena that defied my understanding of physical reality. I finished the film knowing I had witnessed the supernatural, and that fundamentally changed my relationship with existence." The transformations were not limited to those directly involved. Father Jose Maria Escriba, an uncredited consultant on the film and specialist in mystical phenomena, documented an extraordinary pattern among audiences who watched the film during its first week of release. In reports sent to the Vatican, Escribá described a wave of spontaneous spiritual experiences in theaters around the world. Conversions, alleged healings, mystical experiences, and even Marian apparitions were reported with statistically impossible frequency. "We were not dealing with an ordinary film," Escribá wrote. "It was an instrument of grace that systematically and measurably produced supernatural fruits." The phenomenon extended to the theaters themselves. Cinema managers reported anomalous patterns during screenings of The Passion of the Christ. Air conditioning systems mysteriously failed, creating temperature variations that matched the emotional moments of the narrative. Projection equipment exhibited inexplicable behavior, with some copies of the film producing image quality superior to what was technically possible. Even more impressive, night cleaners discovered personal objects abandoned by viewers who never returned to claim them, suggesting experiences so transformative that people left theaters as completely different individuals. 20 years after the release, many of those involved in the production still avoid speaking publicly about their experiences. Extremely strict confidentiality contracts were implemented by Gibson, but sources close to the project reveal that the silence goes beyond legal obligations. "There are things too sacred to be turned into entertainment," confided a technician who asked to remain anonymous. "What we lived transcended cinema. It was an opening between worlds, and some of us are still processing the impact 20 years later." This atmosphere of reverent silence has created an aura of mystery around the film that endures to this day, fueling speculation about events that may never be fully revealed to the public. As we approach 2025 and the start of filming The Resurrection of Christ, an unquestionable truth emerges from behind the scenes of The Passion of the Christ. What happened during that project completely transcended the limits of conventional cinema. It was not merely the production of a religious film, but a collective experience that opened portals between the physical and spiritual worlds, irreversibly transforming all who participated in it. The accumulated evidence over 2 decades points to a reality that defies our materialist understanding of existence. During the filming, the very story of the crucifixion was re-experienced supernaturally by those involved. The courage of Mel Gibson in pursuing this project, despite Hollywood's overwhelming resistance and his devastating personal costs, echoes the biblical passage of 1 Corinthians 1:27, which declares, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong." Gibson, a man broken by addictions and personal crises, became the instrument of a work that touched hundreds of millions of people around the world. His willingness to sacrifice his career and reputation in fidelity to the spiritual vision he received reflects the same kind of radical obedience demonstrated by the apostles who abandoned everything to follow Christ. The physical and spiritual suffering experienced by Jim Caviezel during filming offers a unique window into the nature of Christian sacrifice. His real wounds, the supernatural electrical discharges, the transformation of his physical appearance, and the inexplicable healings he experienced created a living bridge between the 21st century and the original crucifixion events. As Paul writes in Colossians 4:1-24, "Now I rejoice in what I am suffering for you, and I fill up in my flesh what is still lacking in regard to Christ's afflictions, for the sake of his body, which is the church." Caviezel literally completed in his body a participation in the sufferings of Christ, not as a substitute, but as a living testimony of the historical and spiritual reality of the Passion. The secular culture's response to the supernatural events of the Passion of the Christ reveals the depth of the spiritual conflict of our time. The systematic attempt to minimize, ridicule, or silence reports of divine manifestations during the production reflects the same resistance that Jesus faced from the established powers of his time. As Christ predicted in John 15:20, "If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also." The professional persecution faced by Caviezel, the seemingly orchestrated collapse of Gibson's career, and the forced silence about the most extraordinary events demonstrate that the spiritual forces that crucified Christ remain active in our era, resisting any authentic manifestation of his power. The radical spiritual transformations experienced by the production team offer deep hope for our generation. Luca Lionello, who played Judas and moved from militant atheism to fervent faith, demonstrates that no soul is beyond the reach of divine grace. The mass conversions among technicians, extras, and viewers reveal that God continues to work miracles of transformation when His truth is presented without dilution or compromise. As Jesus promised in John 12:32, "And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." The crucifixion, authentically and supernaturally portrayed in The Passion of the Christ, continued to exercise that divine magnetic power 2 decades after its creation. The upcoming filming of the sequel, The Resurrection of Christ, carries prophetic significance for our times. Jim Caviezel, now 56 years old, will be digitally rejuvenated to maintain continuity with the 33-year-old Christ he originally portrayed. This technological transformation symbolizes the very promise of the resurrection. Mortal bodies renewed, human limitations transcended, the final victory of life over death. Mel Gibson described the new film as an acid trip that will explore spiritual realities normally invisible, including Christ's descent into Hades and the liberation of the righteous of the Old Testament. These dimensions of the redemptive work, rarely portrayed in cinema, promise even deeper revelations about the nature of spiritual reality. The pattern of silence that surrounded the most supernatural aspects of the original production reflects the sanctity of those events. As Jesus instructed the apostles after the Transfiguration in Matthew 17:9, "Tell no one the vision until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." There are moments in the Christian experience so sacred they must be kept in the heart before being shared with the world. The fact that revelations about the backstage of the Passion of the Christ are emerging only now, when the sequel is about to be filmed, suggests divine timing for these discoveries. For those of us who were not physically present during filming, The Passion of the Christ remains a portal of access to the spiritual realities that the participants experienced directly. Each viewing of the film offers an opportunity to participate, even remotely, in the supernatural atmosphere that permeated its creation. The prayers whispered in Aramaic captured by the sound equipment, the anomalous lights recorded by the cameras, and the spiritual presences detected by the sensors remain embedded in the very structure of the cinematic work, waiting for open hearts to receive them. The true legacy of The Passion of the Christ does not lie in its box office records or critical recognition, but in the countless lives transformed by its visual testimony to the most important truth in human history. In an era saturated with superficial entertainment and empty narratives, Gibson and his team dared to create a work that not only tells the story of the crucifixion, but allows audiences to experience it in a visceral and spiritual way. As Hebrews 4:12 declares, "For the word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword." The Passion of the Christ became a cinematic expression of that living word, continuing to pierce hearts and transform lives decades after its creation. As we await the continuation of this extraordinary journey with the resurrection of Christ, we are reminded that we participate in a narrative much greater than our individual lives. The supernatural events that marked the original production were not coincidences, but signs that God remains active in human history, using imperfect but willing instruments to reveal His glory. As Paul affirms in 1 Corinthians 2:9, "What no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love Him." The backstage of The Passion of the Christ offers us a glimpse of those invisible realities, preparing us to recognize Christ's ongoing work in our own time and in our own lives. If these revelations have stirred something in your spirit, show it by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing in the comments how God has manifested in your own life.